Hello, my most devout followers, and welcome back to the Celestial Perch. Today I have a new type of video. As you can tell on the screen, we will be looking into Stellaris mods. I've had some requests for this in the past, mainly on, I believe it was Hive Minds, and one other person requested a Fallen Empire mod. I'm going to be sticking with mods I have played with, and this mod being the Ethics and Civics Classic 3.6, I have played with before. So I wanted to start with this as I'll have at least a little bit more experience with it and can maybe give you a little bit more of a viable opinion before I dive into other mods, and that would take a little bit longer. So I wanted to start with something a bit easier. And going into the structure of the video, I'm going to be keeping this somewhat similar to Brodual from Skyrim, if you've ever played that game. And you've watched some of his videos. He has a lot of videos on mods, and he just dives into the core aspects of the mod, as well as kind of what he thinks about it and who it might be good for, who the mod, might work for the best. So that's what I'm going to focus on with that structure, just review the core aspects and then give kind of a brief opinion on it. As well, just let me know if you guys have any future interest in these types of videos. I'm going to try to keep them a lot shorter than my other videos, hopefully somewhere around 5 to 10 minutes.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Just so that they're quick and easy, you can jump in, watch it, see if it's something that interests you, and then leave. But without further ado, let's jump into the mod. So looking at the mod overall, it does change quite a bit, and we're going to be starting with 3 major aspects changed, being the ethics, the authority, and the civics. Looking at the ethics first, as you can clearly see, we have 2 major changes, the first one being that we have 2 new types of ethics, ecocentrist and industrialist, as well as cooperative and competitive. To a lesser degree, we also have just minor changes to other previous ethics like spiritualist, xenophile, pacifist, authoritarian. Pretty much all of the previous old ethics have been changed in either minor or major ways, some of them being changed not as much, and some being changed quite a bit. You can also see that we have 5 ethic points available, so that means we can take 2 fanatics and 1 regular, or several new combinations as well. Makes for very interesting empires, and can add a lot of flavor to your gameplay. In addition, we've gotten a new authority, the direct democracy, and just also some other minor changes to the old authorities. Their passive has been changed as well. The political power modifiers have been adjusted for each type of government, with Imperial having the most ruler political power and direct democracy having the most worker political power, and the others having just a minor change between them. Now, the other major change, of course, are the civics. There are quite a few new civics as well as just some updated civics. You do have some civics that haven't changed at all, like Corvée system or cutthroat politics, but then some have had just updates to the previous civic to make it a little bit more in-depth, and some are just completely new, that give you completely new bonuses that allow you to fine-tune your empire to be a little bit more specific to a playstyle that you're looking to either achieve or a roleplay that you're looking to achieve. So the civic system has been updated extensively with new civics as well as just updates to old civics. Now, the last sort of major thing to look at would be the policies. There are quite a few new policies and updates to old ones as well. Things like the civilian, militarized, and mixed economy are of course still there with a little bit extra attached, and then also new trade policies, updated economic stance, healthcare, education, transportation and logistics, telecommunications, and your authority stance. So quite a few new policies to play with and work around with, and they have varying bonuses depending on what you can choose. For now, I've unlocked all of them just through the console commands, but normally these would be restricted depending on your ethic types. So you won't be able to pick all of these, but they do adjust your gameplay by quite a bit and can make for just better roleplay overall. Now, the last thing to go over, relatively minor change to both the faction and leader system. The faction system not shown, just some updates to factions, adding in new elements for them to either oppose or approve of, and occasionally demanding that you follow a specific authority type. As well, the leaders have been updated. As you can see here, just for starters, there's the economics expertise. The economic field is a thing. As well, just the leader level cap has been, the maximum level cap has been increased to 20, allowing for you to get some very, very powerful leaders, and their passive effects have been slightly adjusted as well. Now that we've at least touched on all of the major changes within the mod, I'm going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into each of them very briefly and give my just kind of initial opinion or thoughts on it and who it might be most beneficial for. In terms of the ethics, authority, and civics, I do very much enjoy the ethic adjustments here. They get a little bit more in depth, some of them a bit too much, but most of them just have some smaller changes, a little bit more added to them. As well, the fanatic variants have some slight negatives attached to them, which I always thought was kind of interesting with this mod. Makes it so that, playing a industrialist will reduce your habitability, or playing a spiritualist will reduce your research speed. There are various aspects of the ethics system that make it a little bit more of a risk-reward or cost-benefit analysis when you're picking them, and as well, having 5 picks means that you'll have no empire that will really truly look the same. So I do like what they've done with the ethics. With the authority, on the other hand, just some really minor changes here. I think the empire modifiers to both dictatorial and oligarchic are kind of dull. Just governor level cap and ruler level cap being sort of unimportant. The faction unity gain moved from oligarchic to indirect democracy, and the addition of direct democracy is just kind of nice as well. I don't have anything against adding in extra authorities. Lastly, the civics. I more so like the updated civics that we get here. So there are, for example, like police state, just a little bit more added to police state. Previously a relatively kind of boring civic, just add some extra stability, some extra unity. Now we get a little bit more of a, not so much of a benefit to it, but just it adds a little bit more flavor to it. It's not necessarily any more powerful than it used to be. It just has a little bit more attached to it, and that can make it a bit more interesting. On the other hand, with some of the civics that it adds in, I do like a vast majority of them. It's just some of them are a bit much. Like Defenders of Nature, it feels like if you were a newer player wanting to experiment with mods and you're picking some of these new civics, you would have to almost have like a PhD in Stellaris to understand, or at least at a cursory glance, kind of gather what the point of this civic is. There are lots of effects, there are lots of sub-effects, jobs, job upkeep changes. So some of these have a lot added to them, and it can be a bit much. Personally, I think some of them can be toned down just ever so slightly, and in my mind, the best civics are the ones that were previously there that have been updated ever so slightly. Those, in my mind, are the most interesting, whereas some of them just have a little bit too much. But overall, I still really do enjoy a lot of the new civics, and they add a little bit more depth in terms of the roleplay. I think my favorite aspect of this mod would actually be the update to the policies, and the policies that you can choose now being a little bit more in depth, as well as some of the old ones updated. I personally feel like the policies in Stellaris just lacking a teensy bit. You only ever really change a few here and there, and just having more to look at and more to kind of choose between would really lend to different playstyles within single player or multiplayer that could really augment both, your regular, more competitive gameplay versus either the AI or your friends. But really here, it would be a great addition just for role players as well. Now, the last thing to go over would just be my recommendation for who I think this mod works the best for. And I think in terms of just considering all players here, the mod would work most effectively for single player players who have a lot of experience in Stellaris. People that have played for probably maybe over 500 hours, have done almost all of the combinations, or at least all combinations they're interested in when it comes to ethics and civics, as eventually, for most players, you might kind of hit a certain cap of you've done everything you want to do. and you understand, or at least have a lot of experience with all of the ethics and civics in the game, as this just adds a lot more depth and a lot more choice. And for an experienced player in single player, as well as a role player, this would be great. I think in terms of people who should maybe avoid this would be either extremely new players, as a lot of the depth might just be a bit too much. You know, when you've played a lot, Stellaris doesn't really feel too in-depth, but when you're new or a beginner, it can be almost overwhelming. So adding in additional things to consider, and a lot of these civics are really in-depth, could be a bit too much. As well as for multiplayer, I wouldn't really recommend it too much beyond just maybe casual roleplay games with your friends. Obviously, you're not going to be taking this into a competitive multiplayer scene and attempting to use this mod. It would just change way too much. It could be an interesting idea. I just wouldn't really recommend it wholeheartedly, as it might be initially unbalanced, and if you've spent a lot of time with the mod, you might have quite an upper hand on other people, whereas at least the base game of Stellaris will lend itself more to kind of a relatively balanced competitive multiplayer scene. I hope you've enjoyed this brief mod review / overview, and if you have any interest in other mods, I've already taken note of a few that have been suggested so far, but if you're interested in this type of video, or just maybe a more in-depth mod review, please let me know. Later this week / weekend, I should also have another video or two out soon here. But thank you, and have a blessed day.